G'day everyone. My name's Michael Chato. I'm the Executive Director of the New Israel Fund. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on Bunurong country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Sovereignty was never ceded. A night like tonight takes months of hard work, just countless hours of behind-the-scenes efforts, and I'd like to begin by recognising that this would not have been possible without my colleague Amy Grossbard, who has worked tirelessly. So please join me in giving a round of applause to Amy. We're really lucky that she's worked so hard on this because I think so many of us here tonight on the 601st night since October 7 are feeling many things. We're feeling that this war has gone on far too long. We're feeling that the hostages have been taken from their homes and are still underground for far too long. That the humanitarian toll and catastrophe in Gaza is more horrific than we ever envisaged, and that we simply want an end to this. And so it's really not easy to come together. I want to pay homage to all of you for coming out, because on nights like this or at moments like this when the pain is very real, it's far easier to turn inward. It's far easier to look away, not to think about the other or someone else, and to simply think about oneself. But what unites us here tonight is looking to a future on the ground that we can all get behind, something that we know will be better. We know there is an alternative that will be better, and that is what brings so many of you here tonight. It's certainly what brings me here tonight. I want to tell a little story that I think encapsulates just a little bit of this, because at a moment where there is so much awful news, we at the New Israel Fund are doing so much on the ground to try and change that, but it can feel unending. Just over the weekend was Yom Yerushalayim, on Monday, Jerusalem Day, where the people on the ground are celebrating or marking the day where East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem are unified. Unfortunately, a day where many violent thugs choose to celebrate that day by marching through the streets of East Jerusalem with Israeli flags, terrorizing Palestinian residents, Palestinian shopkeepers, flipping up their stores, causing mayhem, causing havoc in the name of Judaism, in the name of Zionism. And I know this is certainly not my Judaism. I know that there is an alternative, and I know there's an alternative because one of the organizations that our colleagues across the world support is called Tag Meir. It's an organization that instead of doing this repugnant act of vile terror on Monday, instead chose to take to the streets, as it has for more than a decade now, handing out flowers, Jews and Palestinians together, to shopkeepers, to people, and saying, this is my Judaism. This is what I am doing, because this is what I represent. And in doing that together, it may feel like a small symbolic act, but as my colleague Shira said in Israel, she does this because a little light pushes away a lot of darkness, as Rabbeinu Bachya says in the Duties of the Heart. I think there is so much light from our guests tonight. We are so fortunate to have them. And I really just am so grateful that you're all here, because at a moment like this, we could sure use some optimism that I think they will certainly bring. So I'll turn it over to our moderator to introduce our wonderful guests. But first, our moderator, we're thrilled to have her. Sally Warhaft is a Melbourne broadcaster, anthropologist and writer. She's the host of The Fifth Estate, the Wheeler Centre's live series focusing on journalism, politics, media, and international relations. And The Leap Year, a Wheeler Centre podcast about Australian lives in the fog of the COVID-19 pandemic. She's a former editor of The Monthly and the author of the best-selling book, Well May We Say, The Speeches That Made Australia. Please join me in welcoming Sally.
Thank you, everybody, and really it is such a thrill to be here tonight. I want to thank the NIF for thinking to invite me to moderate our two guests. It is, as was just said, an incredible, it's like a blessing to be able to gather and have conversations like this. So, and it's wonderful to see you all here. Samer Sinijlawi is the head of International Israeli and Diplomatic Relations, the Fatah Shadow Leadership, and the chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund. He was previously head of the International and Israeli Relations on the Fatah Supreme Committee and was in charge of relations between Fatah and the major political parties in Europe and the Arab world, as well as in Israel. He's the Palestinian with the most appearances in Israeli media across television, radio and print. He's been published in the New York Times, Newsweek, The Atlantic, really brilliant piece in The Atlantic, Israel, Hayom and Haaretz. And Dr. Gershon Baskin, a veteran peace activist and entrepreneur. He's the Middle East Director of International Communities Organisation, a British NGO working in conflict zones with failed peace processes. He's also the Director of the Holy Land Bond, an investment fund for building reconciliation in Israel and Palestine. He ran secret and very influential back channels between Israelis and Palestinians for more than 35 years, including the one between Israel and Hamas that successfully negotiated the release of the abducted Israel soldier Gilad Shalit. And in 1988, he founded the Israel-Palestine Centre for Research and Information, which he co-directed for 24 years. So let's give them another warm welcome. I want to begin by talking about the leadership failure on both sides of this. But first, a broader question. The war in Gaza is a terrible, traumatic symptom of a very long, unresolved failure that predates October 7th. And I'd just like you to talk about whether this is a political failure or a human failure. Perhaps, Gershon, you can start.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you to the Newsreel Fund, and thank you, all of you, for coming out to share this evening with us. We Jews and Palestinians have been killing each other for more than 100 years. We've been willing to fight, to die, and to kill for what I describe as a territorial expression of our identity. We want a place that we can call our own, where we are the masters of our destiny, a place that we are attached to historically for many, many years, a place that we describe as the place from which we take our identity and the place to which we give our identity. And the Palestinians are the same place. They come from a land that they believe is theirs, that they give their identity to it, they take their identity from it. And this is documented. If you were to take the Israeli Declaration of Independence and take the Palestinian Declaration of Independence side by side and read them, two really interesting documents. Our declaration, authored primarily by David Ben-Gurion, theirs primarily authored by Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian national poet, who, by the way, when he was tasked by Yasser Arafat to prepare the Declaration of Independence for the State of Palestine, took out the Israeli Declaration and wrote a mirror image. Our declaration, paragraph by paragraph, justifies why we, the Jewish people, have a right to a state of our own in the land of Israel. Their declaration does the same, paragraph by paragraph, why they have a right to a state of Palestine. So here we have a mirror image of each other on a contest of who owns the land, who's been there longer, who has more of a right to be there. This is, I don't know if you would call it a political failure or a human failure. It's a mishap of history that place two people in the same land who are connected to it for over years have denied the legitimacy of the other side to be in the land, to exist in the land. We know that the Palestinians cannot legitimize Zionism. They will never legitimize Zionism. It's impossible. It negates their own narrative. And for many years, we Israelis have been saying the Palestinians are made-up people. They're not a real people. They don't have a real connection. But the truth is that we've both been there for many years, and it is time that we stop this argument over the legitimacy of who has a right to be there. Because I'll tell you a secret. When this horrific war in Gaza is over, there are going to be 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs living in the land between the river and the sea. That's not going to change. So our challenge now is to overcome this illogical, irrational fight of the justification of our legitimacy and to recognize the fact that we're both there. And the only way for us to stop doing what we're doing, the only way to ensure that this will be the last war, is for us to come to terms with each other and figure out how to live together. We believe that the best way to do that is in 2 states, and we'll talk more about that.
Samer, do you answer the question in the same way about a political or a human failing?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and honor to be with all of you. It's until I arrived here that I realized that the 24 hours flight was worth it. So thank you for making this happen, because each time we go to a full house, it means that our voice is important, and this is a lot of appreciation and support. Thanks a lot. And thanks to our host, NIF. It is a human, political failure and a moral collapse, what's happening today by both sides, and allow me to say I admit on our side. And I leave the judgment on if it applies to the other side, because it is very important to stop lecturing each other. The incidents of Jerusalem, when thousands of angry youngsters, I don't want to give them other titles, came and shouted death to Arabs and etc. At the same time, when few people came and gave flowers, for us, the real message came from those who delivered the flowers. Because sometimes if a moral collapse happens or something wrong happens, it will be enough for one people to correct it, one person. The message from these few people who gave flowers to my neighborhood, because it's very hard each year to see that the city becomes like under curfew. We sit in our windows and somebody passes claiming representing Israel, which they don't, because Israel and Judaism is represented by those who deliver the flowers. So sometimes a lonely voice is more important than a wrongdoing of hundreds and thousands. So let's support this lonely voice on both sides. Thank you.
Failure of leadership is it sounds too simple, doesn't it? That it seems to have been so catastrophic, and it doesn't feel like a problem that even the greatest leader in history could solve. That if you put a Gandhi or a Mandela or a Mother Teresa in charge of this, it would still be complicated. But how important is it that leadership is found? And you can go first this time. And where does it come from? Where can it come from?
Let me speak a little bit about Palestinian leadership. If you look at history, the short-term history, the long-term history, it is clear that there was a long history of coexistence between Jews and non-Jews in this land. And this brings us to a big question. Why do we focus on who belongs first, who belongs more? These are the wrong question asked. I think the correct question to be asked how do we both belong? Because if you look at history, Jews have been living in this land. It's a big mistake that we Palestinians in our narrative deny the historical rights of Jews and links to this land. It's a big mistake because it's against historical facts. We should start correcting this. This is an act of lack of leadership. When we deny these rights and nobody comes and say this is a wrongdoing, this is a lack of leadership from our side. It's time that we say we recognize the historical rights of Jews in this land, full stop. It does not mean that we don't belong, because automatically you or the Israelis and the Jewish people in general will start thinking that, well, now we don't have an issue with them. They recognize that we belong here. Maybe we should also remember that we have never been alone in that land. There was always others, and these others are them. So maybe it's also time for us to say that they belong too. When we come to this mutual recognition, 90% of the problems disappear. Because then suddenly the question will be, how can we continue to be belonging? There is no competition here, us or them. So in thousands of years, there was a strong sense of coexistence. This is whom we are by nature. By nature, we are capable to coexist. But in the last 120 years, especially when the British start to be involved, there is a joke of two Irish people, neighbors. When they start fighting in the morning, everybody knows that a British man visited one of them. So it's a joke. I love the British people and I respect them. But so the British visited us, and suddenly, we started to fight each other and fight the British together. So in the last 100 years, we were together, group of militias. We were fighting each other and together fighting the British. Today, Israel is an OECD country, very strong in economy, military, startup nation, wonderful achievements, a country that has 1,000 times more impact than its size on humanity, on international diplomacy. It's amazing. It's amazing that sometimes people are questioning who is the supreme power, Israel or USA. To that extent, this means that you were lucky to have leadership, pragmatic, dedicated, transparent, working hard together with all of you, and you created a good example of existence. While we, up to today, we are still a group of militias. And if you ask me why, lack of leadership. We have been led in the last 100 years by three leaders. Haj Amin al-Husseini, all of you know what were his choices. Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas. All the wrongdoings that might be attributed to the Palestinian people are decisions of these three people alone. Trust me, nobody consulted us. When Haj Amin al-Husseini refused the partition plan, do you think that he has done a referendum first? He just decided alone. And we are blamed historically that we rejected. Who rejected? Did my grandfather reject? If somebody asks me now, do I reject? If somebody asks my kid, and by the way, I have 9 kids. So I know the young generation, how they think, because I have in my family Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen Z, all the gens. I know exactly how young Palestinians, I come here reflecting their voice more than the voice of my generation. So leadership is a key issue. And I think a change of leadership is a must. This is what I try to explain in the Atlantic article. If we want a way out of this conflict, we need both to change the way we think about this conflict, and we need to change our leadership. And we, the Palestinians, have more responsibility to start these changes before than you do. Allow me to say you because I think, you know, Israelis and any Jew all over the world, you are a Jewish people, one Jewish people. We Palestinians, we started to be 6 different tribes, by the way. And I can say something about the 6 different tribes later.
And your 9 children, please, later too. I will come back to them. Gershon, what about Netanyahu, who seems to be clinging on to power? How does this apply in Israel?
I met Samer the first time in 1996 after Netanyahu came to power. 2 weeks after he formed his government, I took a group of members of Knesset from the Likud, from Netanyahu's party, to Ramallah to meet the Fatah leadership. We met in the office of Marwan Barghouti. Samer was there. That was the first time we met. Netanyahu came to power after the assassination of Rabin. Netanyahu was the person who incited against Rabin. Netanyahu is one of the people who bears responsibility for the hatred and division which in Israeli society led to the assassination of Rabin. Yet he was elected and elected and elected and elected again. In 5 rounds of elections that we had before this horrible government that we presently have, the only discussion in Israel was Bibi yes or Bibi no. Ideology, political positions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, on economics, on anything, was removed from our political discussion. The only question of relevance was, is Netanyahu going to remain our leader or not? And he is the longest-serving prime minister in the history of Israel. He literally is a person who said several years ago that he is the greatest protector of Israel and the Jewish people since Moses. He said that. He will go down in history as the worst leader of the Jewish people in history. Netanyahu is a person who has brought division to our country. He bears responsibility not only for the fact that Israel failed to protect itself on October 7th. Let's face it, Hamas was not the Russian army. If the army was on the border on October 7th in the morning, it wouldn't have happened. If there were 15 or 20 tanks on the border and 3 attack helicopters in the air, it wouldn't have happened. But where was the army? They were in the West Bank protecting settlers over the Simchat Torah weekend. Hamas didn't know the army wasn't going to be there. I spoke to one of the leaders of Hamas who told me, we sent 1,500 of our best fighters to attack Israel. We expected over 1,000 of them to be killed. But we crossed the border and there was no army there. If we knew there was no army there, we would have sent 10,000 and conquered Tel Aviv. Netanyahu, to this day, fails to take responsibility for October 7th. He fails to take responsibility for having Hamas funded by Qatar. He refuses to take responsibility for developing the conceptual mode of Israeli politics which designated Hamas an asset and the Palestinian Authority a liability. Because since 2009, when he came to power, his one strategic goal was to prevent international pressure on Israel to create a Palestinian state next to Israel. And he succeeded. Beyond imagination, he empowered Hamas and delegitimized the Palestinian Authority. Samer can tell you they did enough damage on their own, but Netanyahu is the person who discredited them. In 2012 and 2013, after long discussions between me and Mahmoud Abbas, I brought 3 times proposals to Netanyahu to enter into secret direct back-channel negotiations on the 2-state solution, and Netanyahu refused. I will tell you that from my negotiations with Hamas since October 7th, Hamas has wanted to end the war and has been willing to give up all the hostages, and believe me, they're no angels. But Hamas wants to end this war and was willing to give up all the hostages. I brought this in writing, in English and in Arabic from Hamas. In 3 weeks in September, they were ready to end the war. If Israel withdrew from Gaza, ended the war, released Palestinian prisoners, they would give up all the hostages, and they even wrote that they were willing to give up governance of Gaza. And the head of negotiations in Israel told me it's a great plan, but the prime minister refuses to end the war. Last night, I spoke with one of the Americans who are negotiating now directly with Hamas. He's in Doha, in Qatar. And he told me there's a plan on the table that Mr. Witkoff is responsible for, but once again, Netanyahu refuses to accept a permanent ceasefire. He refuses to end the war. The people of Israel want this war to end. Up to 80% of the people in Israel want the war to end and for a deal to be made on the hostages. People say this war has no purpose anymore other than keeping the coalition in place. We call it Milchemet Shlom HaKoalitzia, the war for the peace of the coalition. Hamas is decimated. Hamas is destroyed. They can no longer govern Gaza. We eliminated their political leadership. We eliminated their military leadership. They have guerrilla warfare now. They are capable of continuing to kill Israeli soldiers every day that Israeli soldiers are in Gaza. There is no strategic value to continuing this war, and we are sacrificing the hostages. Even by Israel's own admission, 41 of the hostages have been killed as a result of Israeli military pressure. Now, I believe, ironically, that Trump is the solution. And I say this as a person who was interviewed in the American media before elections that Donald Trump is the most dangerous person in the world. And I believe that. But I also think that Donald Trump is going to be the savior of Israel. I believe that what is happening now is that Trump was convinced by Netanyahu to give him a few weeks to show that Israel can destroy Hamas and bring the hostages home with military pressure. Even though the army says you can't achieve both things. You can't destroy Hamas and bring the hostages home. From a simple, logical point of view, the only way we're going to rescue the hostages is a deal with Hamas. If we destroy them, there's no one to make a deal with to bring the hostages home. We have a risk of losing the 58 hostages who remain in Gaza. If there's no one to make a deal with, they might all turn out to be like Ron Arad, the Israeli pilot who was shot down in Lebanon in 1982 and was never recovered. We have a possibility of 58 Ron Arads. So we need a deal with Hamas. Netanyahu refuses to make the deal. I believe that in a week or 2 or 3 weeks, Donald Trump is going to say to Benjamin Netanyahu, enough, make the deal. On January 19th, the day before Trump entered the White House, Israel signed the deal for the release of the first hostages. We saw those horrible shows every Shabbat watching hostages come home. 3 weeks before that, I was in the office of the head of the Shin Bet, who asked me not to use my back channels with Hamas because in 3 weeks there's going to be a deal, he told me. And on January 20th, when Trump entered the White House, the deal was beginning to be implemented. So I think we have a scenario here where hopefully my assessment is correct and we will see an end to this horrible war. And then we will begin to be post-traumatic because we're still living the trauma. The most traumatic events that have taken place to us as a people since the Holocaust. And for the Palestinian people, since October 7th, they're going through the biggest trauma that they have faced, I believe, even more than the Nakba of 1948. That's the trauma that they're living. So when we try to have a rational, coherent, logical discussion about our future, and you look at public opinion polls, remember that we're all in trauma now, and that's not the best situation to expect someone to be logical and coherent.
Samer, I'm not quite sure how I feel about, the idea of the fate of Israelis and Palestinians being in the hands of the whims of Donald Trump, because he's whimsical. What do you think? Do you agree that he is the great hope of Middle East peace? It's hard to even say it.
I was asked a question once before the American elections. What is better for us? What could be It was, you know, a think tank discussion to give some policy recommendations for Washington, D.C. What would you recommend either the Democrats or the Republicans, each one if they win, in relation to the Middle East? And I said we tried them both. So maybe the best recommendation for them, for me, is please leave us alone. If you leave us alone, nistader. But in the Hebrew, we will find a way among ourselves. This conflict is not about the complexity of the scenarios of solution for Jerusalem or refugees or settlements. It is basically the challenge. Our real mutual enemy is the hard feelings that we have towards each other. If we get rid of these hard feelings, in a couple of hours, two leaders can sign a piece of paper that have 3 words at the end. End of claims. We can get there. Now, is Trump capable to do something? Yes, because the dynamics in the region will help. Because of the very hard experience that the Israelis and Palestinians are facing now. We learned quite few lessons from the experience of the 7th of October and the war. We learned that this conflict cannot be managed. It should be resolved. And we learned that, and I'm really sorry to say that we, of course, I am against of whatever Hamas has done. I went to Kfar Azza, to the envelope of Gaza, and I condemned the atrocities of Hamas in front of cameras. So I'm totally against all what they have done. It is against our moralities, and nothing can justify killing 1,200 Israelis, even if this will bring us a Palestinian state. That kind of state, that kind of end, with this kind of means, I don't want it. I want a Palestinian state in a moral way. So they don't represent me, but when I say we have done to them, because it's we, it's all the Palestinian. I cannot say that they are something different. I mean, they are part of our people, part of the experience that we are living. We learned that with the maximum violence we can do, the results will be terrible. Gaza now has been erased from the map completely. And also for them, the Israelis, they learned that with the maximum military reaction, trust me, Israel couldn't do anything else. The Israeli army have done everything possible in the reaction to the 7th of October, and it didn't work. What was the change of this reaction? Nothing. Still the facts are the same. 7 million Palestinians, 7 million Israeli Jews are living in the same piece of land. So with that incident could have bring us closer to a deal. We are more now able to think in a way out. So there is some dynamics that is happening. You cannot see it now because we are all under several layers of trauma. The Israelis, until the hostages come back, this is going to be an open wound that keep bleeding, and they will focus on it. But I can see deeper. I can see that the Israelis and Palestinians now are more prepared to go steps ahead. They lack leadership. So Trump, in these circumstances, where the Saudis are coming and saying, Yes, we want to endorse Israel. We want to help the Palestinians and their suffer also, even if they did not help themselves to act continuously in a proper way. This might help Trump. He is capable to take decision. He has the character and he has the interest. Because Trump wants to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. This is honestly, he obsessed, he has everything else. And he doesn't understand why Obama got it without signing any peace agreement, just for giving a speech. And Obama for him is also, there is some ego there. And he brought Israel to the Abrahamic Accords with 4 countries and didn't get a Nobel Peace Prize. He wants it now. And second, the economic interest, personally for him and for his group and for his family and also for the American people. And both are achievable through Riyadh. And Riyadh says the road is through Ramallah. Every city with an R is becoming important. So this is the equation. Now, where are the obstacles? The obstacles are 3 people. A triangle of Hamas, and I think Hamas, the Israelis cannot do any more into ending their role in Palestinian politics, but we, the Palestinians, can complete the job. If there will be some political horizons where we come and fill the vacuum and then start attracting them until we come to the very end where there are some people that don't want to deliver their arms, then maybe we need a Ben Gurion with Altelena choice. But it should be a Palestinian. Second is Abbas, because Palestinians are fed up from the corruption that Hamas brought upon them and from the destruction that Hamas brought upon them and from the corruption that Abbas brought upon them. And the third is Bibi. And I'll tell you something. I honestly believe that Bibi wants peace. He's working for peace hard. But he's working for peace within his family, with Sarah and Yair. He's working for peace within his coalition. He wants peace with Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Does he really care about peace with the Israelis and the neighbors? I doubt it. He has a totally different definition of peace. We need to get rid of this triangle, and then the winds will help us with Trump and the Saudis. When Saudi Arabia and the Palestinians will sign with Israel, this will be the real Independence Day for Israel, because Israel, by the way, the Saudis are the undisputed leader for the Arab and Sunni Muslim world. Not Turkey, not Cairo, not Egypt, Saudis. Nobody's different. When Israel signs with the Saudis and the Palestinians, it will become, instead of being the villa in the jungle, it will be the villa in the most developed, wonderful, amazing neighborhood that embraces Israel. And the huge potential that we have with how smart the Israelis are in technology and startup nations and the talents they have and the connection, and we are lucky that we are your enemy, because we became important to the whole world only because we are in conflict with you, because you are the most important people all over the world. It's a fact. And we are lucky to be in a conflict with you. This gave us importance. Who will care about the Palestinians if we were not in conflict with the Israelis? So this kind of power, with the energy and the money of the Gulf, when we merge together, all our lives will change, and it is possible, and I think Trump is capable to do it.
Gershon, you've been at this for decades, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together to negotiate peace. Is there anything different about you talked about coexistence in the beginning and that the breaking of that, the rupture of that at the moment. but particularly with division within Israel?
Yeah, Israel is a very divided society, and it's very difficult. Samer often jokes that he appears on all of Israel media, channel 11, 12, 13, 14. I don't go to channel 14. That makes Fox News look liberal. Channel 14 is the fake news channel, the channel that incites to hatred and lies. Samer appears on channel 14, so he often comments that I know you Israelis better than you know yourselves because I talk to everyone and you don't talk to each other, which is true. I've always said I'm willing to talk to anyone who's willing to talk to me. I have to say that because I talk with Hamas. So I make a point of talking to anyone who's willing to talk to me. I almost never block anyone on social media. There's some people who are intolerable who I do end up blocking, but I try not to. It's a very difficult conversation, but when we appear together, it's a different conversation, and it's much easier. You know, I blame Michael from the Newsra Fund. He sent me an invitation to come to Australia, and I thought, oh my God, that long trip. And I challenged him. I said, I'll come if you invite my Palestinian partner. And he said, yes. So here I am, because this conversation is so much richer and so much more valuable when we're doing it together. And when we appear together in front of Israelis or in front of Palestinians, it's a different discussion. Because our big problem is, I've been talking to Israelis and Palestinians for decades. One of the things that's amazed me since the year 2000, since the Second Intifada, when we lost hope and the peace process collapsed, is that I hear from Israelis and Palestinians the exact same words. They say, we want peace, but they don't. And you know, when I thought about that sentence, we want peace, but they don't, where does it come from? People are not stupid. They reflect the reality that they see. And for 2.5 decades, we have been giving each other the message that we don't want to live in peace. This is what Palestinians understand from Israeli behavior. This is what Israelis understand from Palestinian behavior. So how do we break this? When I know that the majority of Israelis want to live in peace, I know from deep public opinion research that we've done and others have done that have shown that Israelis are willing to make the hard concessions to the Palestinians on one condition, that they believe that the other side are genuine in their desire to live in peace. And the Palestinians say the same thing, to the extent that Palestinians say, we'll give up the right of return if we know we can live in peace in our state. They're not going to invade us every day. They're not going to take our land. They're not going to imprison us. So one of the things that we have been trying to do is to demonstrate partnership, to show people what it means. The two of us as an example. We brought together 2 former leaders, Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister, and Nasser al-Qidwa, the former Palestinian foreign minister, who happens to be the person who was the PLO ambassador in the UN for 17 years, and he's the nephew of Yasser Arafat, and he's originally from Gaza. And we brought Olmert and Nasser al-Qidwa together. They never knew each other. In a few short weeks, once we convinced them, it was harder to convince Nasser than Olmert. He agreed immediately. But once we convinced Nasser to talk to Olmert, and we arranged this by Zoom, in a matter of 3 weeks, they wrote a position paper with a vision for the future. And since that time, the paper was signed in the end of July. Since the end of July, they have met together with us, with more than 30 heads of states and foreign ministers. We arranged an audience with the late Pope in 4 days. They told us in the Vatican it's not possible. In 4 days, we were with the Pope, with Olmert and with Nasser al-Qidwa. We're demonstrating partnership. In the middle of June, from June 12th to June 14th, we are bringing 500 Israelis and Palestinians to Paris with President Macron. The first time in history that a large group of Israelis and Palestinians are going public. I can't tell you how many hundreds of meetings that I have organized of Israelis and Palestinians behind closed doors because they're afraid to tell their own societies that they're talking to the other side. We're finished with secret meetings between Israelis and Palestinians. Now is the time for courage. Now is the time to stand up. Now is the time to demonstrate that the majority of Israelis and the majority of Palestinians want to live in peace. And that's what we're doing.
If in our perfect possible scenario here, President Trump brings peace and wins the Nobel Prize, and what does rebuilding Gaza look like?
Look, let's be honest with ourselves. Gaza, as Samer said, has been wiped off the map. We've killed, the numbers will go up, 60, 70,000 people. By Israel's own admission, Netanyahu said, we killed 20,000 Hamas fighters. He called them terrorists, whatever. That's a self-admission that we've killed more than 30,000 people in Gaza who are not Hamas fighters or terrorists. The majority of them being women and children. No, Samer said something this evening. He said something more dramatic to me. 2 weeks after the war, I was sitting in his living room in Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, and we were watching a Palestinian news station of Israel bombing Gaza. And Samer turned to me and said, Gershon, if we have to kill Israeli children to have a state, I don't want it. I was dumbfounded. I had never heard anyone say something like that before. If to have a state, we have to kill Israeli children, I don't want it. Think of what we have done in Gaza. There are no schools. There are no universities. There are no public buildings. There are no courts. There are no streets. There's no electricity. There's no water. There are no libraries. There is nothing. More than 2 million people are living in tents, and we're moving them around like they're pieces on a chessboard so that the Israeli army can go into new neighborhoods that they've conquered 5 times already. This is something that's going to chase us for a very long time. We Israelis like to travel. Our world is getting very small. There are very few places in the world when you can take out your Israeli passport and people ask you where you're from, and you don't have to be afraid to say Israel. This is our reality. These are the consequences of the things that we've done. Gaza will not be rebuilt if Hamas is in charge of Gaza. As long as Hamas is in power in Gaza, we spent 5.5 hours in the home of the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Abdullah. The Emiratis are one of the biggest funders of humanitarian aid to Gaza. He said to us, we were with Olmert and Nasser Kidwa, Samer and I, 5.5 hours in Sheikh Abdullah's home. He said, if Hamas remains in charge of Gaza, the day that the war is over, our funding and support of Gaza ends. So this is clear. There will be no Hamas in Gaza. There will be a new Palestinian leadership. That new Palestinian leadership will probably be a technocratic leadership that will be there for a temporary period of time. They will invite a temporary force of Arab military people from the Arab countries to come and help reestablish law and order. There needs to be some form of governance, and there's going to be a lot of tens of billions of dollars that need to come to Gaza. And there's competition for that money, because Syria is going through a process of reconstruction, and countries don't want to spend money knowing that it's going to be destroyed again, so they're not going to invest money, not the Saudis, not the Emiratis, not the Bahrainis, not anyone in Gaza, if there's a fear that it's going to be destroyed again. So we're talking about a new reality. Samer makes it very clear that the only way to ensure that there won't be Hamas again, the only way that Palestinian leadership can be reunified again, is through the election box. People are afraid of elections. There were supposed to be elections in May of 21, and the Americans and the Israelis convinced Abbas, who didn't want to hold those elections, to cancel them. And as a result of canceling there was a festival of democracy taking place in Palestine. People don't know this. The Palestinians have an electoral system like in the United States, where you have to go and register to vote. I don't know how it is in Australia. I know that you people have to vote by law. In Israel, we're automatically on the voter registry when you hit the age of 18. We don't have to do anything. You have the right to vote. Palestinians had to go and register. 86% of the Palestinian people went to register to vote in May of 2021. They registered 36 political parties to run in those elections. Abbas canceled him, not because of what people say, because Hamas would win. Hamas wouldn't have won. Abbas would have lost. That was clear. So he canceled the elections. They need to go to elections. They need to choose their leaders. They need to have a legitimate leadership that represents them, and only then we can begin to talk about reconstruction. In the meantime, we, humanity and Israel, have a moral responsibility to help the people of Gaza. People are dying from starvation. People don't have water. People don't have food. It's not made up. It's real. And it's at our hands. Hamas is responsible, but we did the damage.
Samer, I would like to ask you about your children and children growing up in this region. And we know something, of course, of the reports of just the appalling suffering of children in Gaza. How do kids like your kids that are not in that terror zone, and yours too in Israel, what effect does this have on the children who are going to be growing up and looking at this long history and deciding, do we want coexistence or don't we after this trauma?
Well, they are victims of the situation, definitely, because they become a product of this conflict. I was a product of this conflict at the age of 14 when I simply turned from a kid that is doing piano lessons to a kid that is throwing stones. It wasn't something that I've done voluntarily. Something invaded me. And I think every day on both sides, our kids and their kids are invaded by a lot of confusion, disruption of their naturality. Because if you want to ask me what is their pure naturality, I will tell you a story that happened with me as a father 4 years ago, I think, during the end of the COVID, when the cinemas started, showing movies. There was a new version of Spider-Man. In East Jerusalem, we don't have cinemas. We don't have public swimming pools. We don't have malls. In the United Eternal capital of Israel, there are 2 Jerusalems there that you don't notice, including me, who I was born under Israeli sovereignty. I was annexed my father and grandfather, but I am until now resident but not citizen. A big question, why? Have you ever seen a capital of a state that 40% of its inhabitants are not citizens? And until when and why? And why I am not a citizen of any state until now? This is part of the dilemmas that we are. Anyhow, so I took 2 of my daughters. They insisted they want to go and see the movie. I took them to a movie in West Jerusalem, and we entered to a hall that was full of Jewish Haredim kids, maybe the neighborhood, but it was like this because their age. I noticed the following. There was something that I didn't understand, because sometimes some scenes come and all of them jump and laugh. The scenes couldn't mean anything to me, but for them, these are scenes from the old versions of Spider-Man, and they were recalled. So their actions was similar. I noticed that, my daughters, they speak Arabic in my home. They speak with themselves in Arabic, and they speak with me in Arabic. I noticed that they started speaking in English, and all the other Jewish kids are speaking in English. So even they shift to the American culture of movies and speak the language automatically. I couldn't differentiate between my kids and the other kids. They looked the same. So this is their nationality. Now, do we disturb their thinking? Yes, of course. This conflict is so strong on them. But I can tell you that the young generation is not so much like me. When I was their age, I was very sensitive to symbols. For me, the color of the flag was very important. And for me, placing a poster of Arafat on the Damascus gate, even if I receive a bullet in my head, was something good. I want to do it because he's the symbol. If you ask my kids now, who is the Palestinian president, they don't know the name, and they don't care. If you ask them to draw the Palestinian flag, they will mix between the green and the black. They don't know who comes up, who comes down. They don't care about symbols. And I asked one of my daughters one question once. I told her, listen, what do you prefer? 2 states or 1 state? And her answer was, well, Dad, ask your friends, the Israelis. Tell them what do they prefer. I am ready to take any option they choose. I'm ready for both. If they go towards 2 states, fine. If they go towards 1 state, also I am accepting it. Then I told her, but listen, most of them now hesitate to go to the 2-state solution. They might prefer 1 state, but they want it to be Jewish state. She said, okay, they can call it Buddhist state if they want. As far as I have a passport and I have equal opportunities, they can call it whatever they want. So there is a generational change. The young generation wants opportunities. Okay, they are patriot. They can express themselves in different ways. Of course, I was speaking about the 6 Palestinian tribes. You might not feel that the young Palestinian generation here in diaspora have the same experience because, generally speaking, the more you are distanced from the center of the conflict, the more the Palestinians became less realistic. So in Gaza, they are the most realistic people. If you ask them now, what is the political cause? What is your best political imaginations? What really do you want? What do you ask the world? What do you ask the United Nations? The answer would be a bottle of water. But if you go to the diaspora here in Melbourne, they will tell you from the river to the sea, for God's sake. Illusions in La La Land. So we need to understand this complicity. On our side, we have lost our national identity. The Palestinian people now are 6 different Palestinian peoples. The real Palestinians are those in Gaza. Then comes the West Bank, then comes Jerusalem, then comes until we come to Melbourne.
I'm going to throw it over to the audience in just a moment to ask some questions. So you'll be able to put your hand up, and I think a microphone will be. Are the microphones at the front? If you would like to ask a question.
Maybe they can turn on the lights so that we can actually see people.
Yes, you'll be able to line up right there and at the front and ask a question. And while you're considering doing that, just to pick up on something that was said, is all the noise, the protests internationally, does it help?
You know, I meet people from all over the world who've lectured on campuses in the United States, and we're here in Australia. And the one thing that occurs to me when I see the conflict here is that it's, to me, totally insane to import the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to Melbourne. I don't understand it. If you want to help Israel, help Israel. You want to help Palestine, fighting the conflict on the streets of Melbourne doesn't make any sense. You're not helping Israel, you're not helping Palestine. Get over it. Do something constructive. This is my answer. I have no problem with people wanting to help Palestine. I want to help Palestine. It makes no sense to me as an Israeli for Palestine to be poor and a failed state. I want them to succeed. I want them to have a high-tech economy. I want them to be integrated into the world. I want happy neighbors. Why should I want the Palestinian people to suffer? And I think the Palestinians would be very happy if the Israelis were successful and sharing their success with them. Palestinian poverty doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. So let's do something constructive. And if we could do it together, wow, wouldn't that make a difference? If we actually work together, people who support Israel and people who support Palestine, to do something constructive together that helps us reach peace.
Let's go over to the questions. If we got, please stand up and ask a question. You will have to ask it into the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to Australia. You've preempted my question. To both of you, what is the constructive course that you would urge the Melbourne Jewish community to be doing? What is the constructive course that you would be urging the Melbourne Muslim community to be doing? What is the constructive course that you'd be telling all Australians to urge our government to do?
Well, I think I would suggest that you start rallying under the slogan "From the river to the sea," but we have a modification to this. From the river to the sea, to two-state solution, we all agree. It brings us all together again, instead of who is belonging to. Because, you know, this issue of from the river to the sea, do we really want to throw the Jew to the sea? This is nonsense. But again, when we see our kids putting this necklace with the whole map, we see your kids also putting the same necklace with the whole map, with some differentiation. A plus the Golan Heights. So when you look at the map, you recognize who's Palestinian, who's Israeli. And by the way, all of them are made in the same in the same factory in China. And I'll tell you something. We started mistakenly buying the wrong necklace. I've seen this in a Jewish conference in Jerusalem, right-wing Jewish conference. I was sitting next to two ladies from New York, and I saw the wrong. And I asked them, from where did you buy the necklaces? They said, from the old city. I told them, okay, you brought the wrong ones. These are the Palestinians from the river to the sea. This is how confused we are.
I would say what I expect from the Jewish community here, from the Muslim community here, from Australian citizens, is to tell their government to put up or shut up. How many years can a government, and believe me, Australia's not alone, how many years can a government say two states and only recognize one? Let's be real. If you're for two states, recognize both states. That's not going to change the reality at home. The Palestinians only need Israel to recognize Palestine. But let's not be hypocritical about it. So I would say, and I say this to the Australian government, we say to the French government and the German government and the British government, if you support two states, call on all the member states of the United Nations to recognize both states. Not all the countries in the world recognize Israel. So let's call on our governments to recognize the state of Israel and recognize the state of Palestine, and at least from the international legal point of view, recognize that the two-state solution is viable and real again. So that's what I expect. And I think that if you go to your Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim neighbors who are out there fighting for Palestine, and you say, I support the recognition of the state of Palestine by Australia, I hope that you support the recognition of Israel too. Maybe we can have a different conversation.
Two simple questions which may not necessarily have simple answers. In the last 24 hours, Ehud Olmert has said that Israel is guilty of crimes against humanity. Your comment and response, number one. Secondly, is Barghouti the potential savior of the Palestinian people?
Okay, on the first question, I would like to tell you that whatever we do as Palestinians, being barbarian on the day of the 7th of October will be stuck to us. In the collective memory of history, whatever we do, whatever we advocate, how much we are smart in social media or our hasbara or whatever, we will not be able to erase that we were barbarians on the 7th of October. Unfortunately, whether I want it as Palestinians or not. And for the Israelis, whatever they will do, it will be hard, very hard, to try to erase the term genocide from what's happening in Gaza. Whether the term applies or it does not apply, or was it the intentions there or not, it doesn't matter. The world is seeing us in a way that would be very hard for us to try to end this kind of collective memory against us. We are somehow very ugly in front of the rest of the world. It's not important how I think about myself or how the Israelis think about themselves. It's more important how the whole world is thinking about us. About Marwan Barghouti, I know the guy very well. I was so close to him for 7 years. But Marwan Barghouti has been in jail for 23 years. He's a black box. Yes, the Palestinians need a Mandela, but he doesn't need to come from out of prison. I mean, a Mandela can be a free person also. Nelson Mandela was not important because he was in prison. It was important because of his vision. He shifted the South African towards non-violence. He found the right way to think about that conflict and lead it, and he led his people. So it's not necessary somebody from the prison, but we need a leader of change that understand that the Israelis are not our enemies, that the fear inside their hearts, the lack of security is our enemy, that we need to put a strategy not to try to defeat them, but to try to defeat that lack of security in their hearts. And that the best way to do it is by to place and put the Israeli security at the basis of any Palestinian strategy, not to do them a favor, but out of national interest. Most of the Israelis are hesitant to accept a two-state solution out of security concerns. There are some who come from some ideology background, but the majority of them, what blocks them is they don't trust us. They have the heavy memory of the 7th of October and the Second Intifada and backwards the Holocaust. And they are very sensitive on their security. We need to understand this. This conflict is two words. From one side, it is security. From the other side is human dignity and freedom. And we need to start understanding this conflict from the other side's eyes.
So it's a comment about Marwan Barghouti. When the current head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, became the head of the Shin Bet, I wrote him and suggested to him that he learn from the South African example, and it wasn't de Klerk who started talking to Mandela, it was Botha. a hardcore apartheid regime, started a dialogue with Mandela, and I suggested to Ronen Bar that he, as the head of the Shin Bet, doesn't need permission from the prime minister. He, out of security concerns, can begin a dialogue with Barghouti, and I suggested to him that it would be much better if Israel arrived at a deal with Barghouti for peace, rather than the possibility that Barghouti might be freed in a deal with Hamas as a result of a hostage situation. He wrote back to me that he wanted to remind me that Barghouti was serving 5 life sentences plus 40 years for being responsible for leading the Second Intifada. I was well aware of that. I won't go into the whole history of Marwan's leadership and what he did during the Second Intifada. It's really not important right now. But a few years ago, I approached one of the former heads of the Shin Bet and asked him if he would be willing to carry on a correspondence with Barghouti. I checked with Barghouti's lawyer first, who spoke to Marwan in prison, and Marwan agreed. So he carried on this correspondence. The last correspondence was a 4-page letter that Marwan had written to this former head of the Shin Bet, explaining his vision for peace, and it was a vision for a 2-state solution, supported by a regional security arrangement, and it sounded very logical. We never managed to get the response of the head of the Shin Bet back to Marwan because they stopped visits of lawyers and families, and then October 7th happened. Since October 7th, Marwan has been moved 5 times to different prisons. He's in solitary confinement most of the days, sitting in the dark. He's been starved and beaten. The Israeli prison authority today is controlled by Ben Gvir, who controls the police and the prison authority, and that's the situation of most of the security prisoners in Israel today, that they're being badly abused. There used to be some kind of international legal standards of the way that Israel treated Palestinian prisoners. That doesn't exist anymore. Ben Gvir got rid of those standards. There are no visits by lawyers. There are no family visits today, and food rations are very, very small. So we don't know what the impact of this is on Marwan. Marwan is the most popular Palestinian leader. He comes out first in the polls. In every single Palestinian poll is the choice of the Palestinian people. He is the symbol of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian resistance. He has always maintained that the Palestinians, by international law, have a right to use the armed struggle, but it is not their first choice. Their first choice is diplomacy. I believe that this is still Marwan's position, but we don't know. I've been in contact with Marwan's children and with Marwan's wife, but they have not been allowed to visit him since the beginning of the war. So we really don't know what his standing is and what would happen if he were to be released. It is a black box, as Samer said, and yet he is a Palestinian leader, and he could be a leader that could lead the Palestinian people to peace, but we don't know.
Thank you. I want to pick up on that. You talk about security. And Gershon, you said a while back in our talk that you mentioned that on October 7th that the Israeli army wasn't there. It wasn't where it should have been, and there were no helicopters in the sky. But that's not a solution, is it?
No, of course not. The solution is to resolve the conflict. As Samer said, there's no management of this conflict. The policy of Netanyahu was to manage the conflict and to ensure that we have no Palestinian partner for peace. It was easy for Netanyahu to say to the world, who do you want us to negotiate with? These guys in Gaza who are dedicated to our destruction, or this illegitimate, corrupt person in Ramallah? And the world accepted it. You know, I sat at a table one evening in the home of the Norwegian ambassador, and the Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, and Danish ambassadors were all there. And I said, only Sweden recognized the state of Palestine. I said to them, why don't you all recognize the state of Palestine? Let's move forward. One of them said to me, you want us to recognize that corrupt regime in Ramallah? And I said, give me a break, like you don't have diplomatic relations with other regimes in the world that are less than democratic? That's the criteria for whether or not you recognize a people's right to self-determination and nationhood in a state? Sure, we want Palestinians to be democratic, and we don't want them to be corrupt, and we would like them to observe the human rights of their own people. But that's not a reason why you don't recognize a people's right for a legitimate existence. So it's it is complex in those terms, but here the solution is so obvious. And as Samer said, it's not that complicated. It really isn't. We've negotiated for over 20 years. We know the solutions to every issue in conflict: borders, settlements, refugees, Jerusalem, economic relations, energy, water, everything. There are solutions for every one of these issues. What we lack is the confidence that the other side is real about it, because we have a failed peace process. We had no way of dealing with the failure of the peace process when it failed. We didn't build in any mechanisms that any person who writes a contract knows what you do when the contract is broken. We didn't think about it. We had a naive peace process. We can't be naive. We have to have an intelligent peace process. And this is going to sound strange, but we have to build a peace process which is based on lack of trust. We have to build a peace process which has benchmarks, where we don't take on additional risks unless we're sure that both sides have implemented their commitments. Because Israel and Palestine signed 6 agreements during the Oslo peace process, and we breached all of them. Both sides. We breached the most basic commitments that we undertook. We did not implement them. So we also need a third-party mechanism which is going to monitor and verify the implementation of agreements. The US and the Soviets did it during the arms control agreements. They had mechanisms built into the agreements to ensure the implementation of the agreements so that they're not dismantling nuclear weapons while the other side is not. We can build those mechanisms. We need an intelligent peace process. We have the knowledge to do it. There's no reason why we have to make the same mistakes we made in the past. We'll make new mistakes, but we don't have to repeat the mistakes that we made. We can do this, but we have to start somewhere with the kind of understanding that the two of us have and new leaders who are going to lead us in that direction.
We probably have time for one more, but you'll have to go to the microphone if you can. It'll be the last.
Do we have any
one.
women who want to ask
Thank
a
you.
question?
Oh, is there
Where are the
someone there?
women?
I'm sorry, it's dark there. We do have someone. You're next, yes. Apologies.
You've discussed the leadership issue to do with the Palestinians. With Israel and the right-wing people running the show now, what leadership do you see in Israel for this?
I'll be honest with you, I don't see any leaders in Israel right now. I really don't. None of them. The polls are pointing to Bennett leading in the polls. Bennett has always done well in the polls and not so well on election day. He became prime minister with 6 seats in the Knesset, 7 seats, I don't remember. Bennett scares me, honestly, he scares me. I think that he is, as Olmert calls him, Ben Gvir in a suit. He's an ideologue who wants to annex the territories. He doesn't want to make peace with the Palestinians. But what I will tell you about Israel is that before October 7th, we had 40 weeks of demonstrations to save our democracy, led by civil society. The most amazing people that you can imagine stood up and took positions of leadership in civil society in Israel to protect our democracy. And since October 7th, civil society saved Israel. Our government failed. We had a dysfunctional government, a terrible government. We scraped the bottom of the barrel in terms of the quality of the people who represent us in the Knesset. But we have an amazing civil society, and there are a lot of people who stood up and took positions of leadership. And they may not be the people who are elected the next time we have elections, but the time after that, they will be there. And they're beginning to stand up, and they're beginning to join political parties. And when we do go to elections, we're going to have a reshaping of the political map. There will be new political coalitions and alliances and new individuals who are going to stand up and come to politics, because we can't allow the garbage that leads us today to continue. And I guarantee you that 2/3 of the people sitting in the Knesset today will not be in the next Knesset. Thank God they won't be in the next Knesset.
Thank you very much. I guess my question is, I hope, like everyone, I was really kind of had mixed feelings about coming tonight. And having heard what you've said, I can't believe it. I feel just very mildly optimistic. And I wondered whether there was that also. Are you in touch with people in Israel who share your vision, and can you see a process, a way forward with this next generation, given the trauma and given the guilt?
Look, I'm personally in a very bizarre situation in Israel. You know, I've been talking to Hamas for 18 years. It's illegal. I've never been arrested. And I communicate with the leaders of Israel and the people responsible in the security establishment all the time about my talks with Hamas. I don't hide it. It's in public. Everyone knows. I'm called every day to be interviewed in the Israeli media, in the mainstream media, on radio and television. As we were sitting here, I turned down 2 interviews because I'm on Australia and they want me to be interviewed at 4 in the morning here. So for some reason, they want to hear my voice. I hope I'm not just filling up airtime, airspace. People want to hear what I have to say. That doesn't necessarily mean that they support me, but the voice that I'm bringing is legitimate, and people want to hear it. I have spent more time talking to Hamas than any other Israeli alive, except perhaps prison guards. And my conversation with them is very different. I've spent 47 years now crossing borders, meeting with Palestinians, working with Palestinians. I did this with Israeli Palestinians for 10 years, and over the last 37 years, been doing it with Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza and in East Jerusalem. To this day, I receive messages every single day from people in Gaza. So I don't know to what extent people share my opinions, but they want to hear it, and I hope I have some influence. I don't know. I know that I'm much stronger when I do it together with Samer, and I make a point of doing it with Samer and with other Palestinians. And now we're making great efforts not to only raise our voice in Israel, but to raise our voice in Palestine together as well. And that's a big challenge, and we're doing that. Samer appears all the time on Israeli television, on all the channels. I've had a column in Al-Quds newspaper, the largest and most important Palestinian newspaper. I've had my column there in Arabic for 3 or 4 years now. They publish everything that I write. And something that happened as a result of Samer is that there's a Palestinian from Gaza, whose name is Khalid Jude, who was one of the leaders of a movement in Gaza about 12, 15 years ago called Bidna Na'ish, We Want to Live. And this was a movement that rose in Gaza, had tens of thousands of members, and they were opposed to Hamas. Hamas killed the leadership of Bidna Na'ish. Khalid was shot 17 times and spent more than a year in a hospital in Cairo, and now he's living in exile in Sweden. He works as a journalist. He has more than 250 WhatsApp groups that go to tens of thousands of people in Gaza, and everything I write goes to tens of thousands of people in Gaza now as well.
Thank you for your question and for all the questions. I'm going to hand over in a second to Rick. I just want to say how much I've just loved the opportunity to ask questions of you two. And, you know, when you talked about the map, and I want one of those, you reminded me, I used to live in Bombay, and there's a swimming pool there that I used to swim in that is the shape of India before partition. And, you know, I hope that a pool can be built in your part of Jerusalem one day, that your kids can swim in and all the kids can swim in, and cinemas and everything else. It's been such a pleasure. Rick.
Please, thank them. So we have gone over time, and I thank you for your patience. I'm going to ask for just a little bit more. I've got a couple of things I'd like to say. The first thing is, it is amazing how you've all come out tonight, and again, as echoed by Samer and Gershon, it's incredible to stand here and to see you all. It's very heartening. We look over the series of speakers that we've had since October 7, And we've been very intentional. And if you've been, you've probably not seen that intention, but I just kind of want to share with you the intention that we've had, because I think it's important. So last year, we had Avida Bush, who was a victim survivor of October 7, but he is also the CEO of Rabbis for Human Rights, who spends their time in the West Bank, in the occupied territories, protecting Palestinians to go about their daily lives. We followed them with Shahad and Nadav from Standing Together, the largest grassroots organisation in Israel that has Jewish and Palestinians in their leadership, and Jewish and Palestinian supporters doing incredible work. And Michael mentioned Tag Meir with the flowers. There were people from Standing Together who were literally creating human shields around Palestinian market holders in East Jerusalem during Jerusalem Day. And they are the ones that have initiated, and we have helped fund getting food that has been donated from towns and villages, Jewish and Palestinian, across Israel, into trucks to the Gaza border to feed Gazans. And this was before the last horrific 10 weeks of blockade. So incredible people. And then now we have Gershon and Samer. And please welcome, thank them again. And how amazingly they have articulated the need to talk about peace even in this time of war. Because if we don't start talking about peace now, then when will it happen? And I think the courage of that conviction, following the courage of the others who have come to speak, really speaks volumes for what it is that NIF is doing. We are proud of the work we do. We are the only Jewish organisation that spends literally tens of millions of dollars every year supporting human rights and social justice organisations in Israel. We are dedicated to ensure that we map the population, and that at minimum 21% of the money we grant is to Palestinian-led organisations. So we are intentional about what we do. We are committed to that work, and we are against this occupation. We are against this war. We are proudly pro-democratic. We want to see two states that have living freely, that can express their national identity and their cultural heritage freely. And these are things that Samer and Gershon talk about every day. They are having this amazing rally in Paris to, again, publicly state these things. And if we want to be involved in that, as Israelis are involved in that, 1 in 7 donors to the New Israel Fund, and we have donors all over the world, of which you are many, 1 in 7 are Israeli. There is no other philanthropic organisation in the world who can say 1 in 7 of their donors is Israeli donating to social justice and human rights. So, we might be a lone voice here, but you show us that we're not alone. And the importance of our work is only to power those people. So it's coming towards the end of the financial year. You have to expect me to ask, and I am, because every dollar helps, right? It's for their sake, but it's also for our sake. So I really hope that you take away from today this wonderful